So, I'd be lying if I said I've been slacking in my job of covering the most recent chapters of Hunter x Hunter. And honestly, the reason I've been slacking isn't because I haven't been reading Hunter x Hunter, just because I've thought a lot of the chapters that have come out recently weren't necessarily worth covering. Now, it's not really saying the chapters have been bad, but more so just if I was to cover the chapters, it would kind of just me be reading exactly what was happening in these chapters out to you. Because Togashi ironically does something with his manga writing style that I tend to do with these videos, which is oversimplify at the cost of length. And so when it came down to chapter 402, 403, and 404, I just thought, nah, not anything that I really need to break down here. However, that is not the case with chapter 405. See, chapter 405, like chapter 401, is back to peak Togashi. Yes, there's oversimplifications. Yes, it could have been a 40-page chapter. Yes, there's so many words. But chapter 405 reminds you why you read a Togashi manga. See, because not only are future timelines being set up and new and interesting powers are being introduced, but you can see the heart and soul that this man is weaving into this story. And timelines and plot points that he set up years ago are just now promising to pay off. And therefore, in celebration of chapter 405 being the peak content that I expect from Togashi, today I want to break it down. Well, at least I want to break down a theory that's now been solidified with the release of chapter 405. See, because I've been sitting on a mountain of Hunter x Hunter theories, just wondering as to whether or not anybody would want to hear them from me. But now that a theory that I crafted over 2 years ago may prove to be right in the next couple of chapters, I need to speak my piece. So today, we are going to be talking a fair amount about chapter 405, the big important things that happened in the chapter as a whole, and how they play into my theory. My theory that Morena is Sarasa. Now, for those who don't remember, Sarasa was Chrollo's childhood friend. The same childhood friend who was brutally murdered by people who used Meteor City as a hunting grounds. The very same friend who was the reason that Chrollo decided to turn his life to villainy and create the version of the Phantom Troop we know and love today. Yes, that very same Sarasa who should not be alive. I believe that she is none other than the leader of the Hailey family herself, Morena. But why do I believe that? How could it be true? And what did chapter 405 do to cement this theory as 100% correct? Well, today we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more, because today we're talking Morena's secret identity revealed. So before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, Nick, that t-shirt you're wearing looks really cool, you're right, it is really cool, because it's a brand new drop in my NCH Archive merch line, where I cross over my love of streetwear and anime. You can find the entire line in my fourth wall link, which is in the description below. That today, we're gonna talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Web Novel. Yeah, you know them, you love them, and apparently they love me, because here I am getting sponsored by them. But today, I want to focus less on Web Novel and more on a novel that just came to Web Novel. And that's a book that I've been absolutely enthralled with recently, the first legendary Beastmaster. See, if you like zero to hero stories, then this book is right up your alley. The story revolves around our MC, Carl, who's born into a dirt-poor mining family. And Carl only has one path to get ahead in life, the annual Elite Recruitment Day. See, in this universe, on the final day of middle school, every student is given an injection to see if they can awaken to magic. And those who do awaken to magic become the elite, beings blessed with incredible magical powers and are thus thrust into leadership roles in this country. And those who don't awaken to magic simply return back to their lives of toil and hardship. So follow along with the story as Carl awakens a new magical power and tries to become the first ever legendary Beastmaster. See, as somebody who always plays as a hunter or a beast tamer in my MMORPGs, I am a sucker for the beast taming genre. This universe takes beast taming to a whole nother level, with every beast that's being tamed having a rich character profile and incredibly distinct characteristics that shape the way that the MC thinks and approaches problems throughout the course of the book. On top of that, Carl is one of my favorite MCs in years. It is absolutely thrilling to watch him go from the youthful days in his middle school to an adult trying to conquer the world with his beasts. He's a stabilizing force throughout the entirety of the book, and I adore him. But his ability to stabilize the story does not mean that the story is boring. No, the story intensifies gradually, eventually becoming very, very dark, but never oppressive. And that's all in thanks to the series of beasts that are introduced over the course of the story, who bring levity and a lightened pace exactly when they're needed. It's waiting for. Download the Web Novel app today and add the first legendary Beastmaster to your reading list. You heard me. All you have to do is download the Web Novel app today using the link in my description, and you'll be off to the races to read one of the most entrancing books I've read in years. So, chapter 405. 405. It had a little bit of everything. We saw Hisoka winning tons of money in the Tier 1 casino. We learned that Bonolinov has the ability to turn into people proportional to the amount of time he's talked to them, which when you consider the fact that he also has the ability to turn into Saturn, the planet, that's not that crazy. We learned that Chrollo is specifically on the Black Whale to finish what he started in his battle against Hisoka in Heaven's Arena. And we also learned that somewhere on the Black Whale there is a treasure that Chrollo identifies as a technique that would be able to wipe out Hisoka once and for all. But while those are the plot points that so many people are talking about, those are not the most important plot lines from this chapter. Well, I understand this chapter seemed as though it was stuffed to the gills with important plot points, so choosing which one to focus on is kind of a struggle. Trust me when I say Hisoka gambling, Bonolinov, or Chrollo saying that he wants to defeat Hisoka are not the important plot points here. Because really when it comes down to it, the most important plot points that were given to us in chapter 405 of Hunter x Hunter revolved around a man by the name of Mr. Rinsworth and his possible, all but confirmed connection to Morena and Chrollo. But before we dive deep on Mr. Rinsworth, let's take it back a step and talk about Sarasa. It's been almost 2 years since we got the Phantom Troop backstory, so I'm sure some of you need a light touch-up. Sarasa, for those of you who don't remember, was one of Chrollo's childhood friends, and technically one of the original members of the Phantom Troop, back when the Phantom Troop was doing troop things. That is to say, back when the Phantom Troop was a traveling troupe of actors who would go to different parts of Meteor City and perform for all the children there while dubbing over power cleaners. But before the Phantom Troop came together to dub over power cleaners together, they weren't all friends. Finks and Phaeton were their own group, Uvagin and Machi were their own group, and then Chrollo, Sheila, Pakunoda, and Sarasa were their own group. That is to say that Sarasa is one of Chrollo's oldest friends, older than Uvagin, older than Machi, Finks, or Phaeton. And Sarasa is really the only reason the Phantom Troop comes together in the first place. See, because while all the other factions of the Phantom Troop outside of Chrollo were antagonistic towards Chrollo and his troop, Sarasa, being an incredibly bubbly and extroverted person, would meet that antagonism with kindness. And this is how people like Finks, Uvagin, and Phaeton eventually found their way into the fold of the Phantom Troop under the umbrella of Chrollo. All that is to say that if Sarasa didn't exist, the Phantom Troop probably never would have been made. However, through the underbelly of the Phantom Troop background story, there's a minor plot line that people have been coming to Meteor City to abduct children and conduct human hunting. Because at the end of the day, everything thrown into Meteor City is considered trash. And so all of the children and adults that live in Meteor City aren't necessarily seen as humans. So humans who want to be able to hunt other humans or abduct children to sell, possibly, would go to Meteor City to act on those wants. Now, during the Phantom Troop backstory arc, it is said that these abductions and murders are becoming less and less frequent. However, still, unfortunately, when Sarasa goes out to try and find another episode of Power Cleaners for the Phantom Troop to dub over to surprise Chrollo, she is unfortunately abducted and later cut into pieces, thrown in a bag, and slung over a tree. That is to say, brutally murdered. Now, we didn't necessarily have a good idea of who did this. All we saw over the Phantom Troop backstory arc is that the person associated with rounding up all these children and committing all these murders had a gigantic wart on their nose and a mole on their chin, which is where Mr. Rinsworth comes into the equation. See, because in chapter 4 or 5, in a page that many considered a throwaway page, on the Black Whale, the news is talking about how 10 years ago to this date was the date that Mr. Rinsworth, a well-known philanthropist, was brutally murdered. Now, apparently, Mr. Rinsworth was the head of a charity organization known as Mom's Help, which dedicated itself to helping children. It's also established in this news broadcast that Mr. Rinsworth's murderers have never been found, but every single year, the outcry to find them gets stronger and stronger. Now, there's a crowd of people watching this news report, and we do get some information from them. Like one guy who's watching the news report who says, didn't somebody take credit for this murder and the news announced it, but then the news broadcasting platforms all walked it back in a really weird and mysterious way. But the most important reaction to this news, the piece of information that solidifies the fact that Mr. Rinsworth was actually the person abducting and killing children in Meteor City, is Chrollo's reaction to the news. As he says, the untimely death of a philanthropist. Haha, who are these morons who take media at its face value? Now this shows to us that yes, Chrollo has animosity for Mr. Rinsworth, and most likely Chrollo was responsible for his death 10 years ago, which would mean the 28-year-old Chrollo killed Mr. Rinsworth when he was 18. But why bring this up now? Why bring up Mr. Rinsworth's death and Chrollo's hand in it right now? Well, because Mr. Rinsworth played a absolutely massive role in the foundation of the Phantom Troop into the entity that it is nowadays. See, without Mr. Rinsworth coming to Meteor City and killing Sarasa, Chrollo would have been an actor actor. But instead, because of the brutality that Mr. Rinsworth enacted on Sarasa, the Phantom Troop was turned into a group of militant thieves. It was Mr. Rinsworth who forced Crollo into a life of crime. And bringing up Mr. Rinsworth and his death is supposed to draw our mind back to Sarasa for what's revealed in the second half of this chapter. See, because this chapter did more than throw out the identity of Sarasa's killer. It also threw out the idea that Morena may not be Morena. See, I've had a theory since chapter 397 dropped over 2 years ago that Sarasa is Morena, because Morena has 2 facial scars and wears a crown of thorns. Now, outside of the obvious connections to Jesus that could be made here, Sarasa was cut to pieces, and I mean many pieces, and then was laid to rest with a flower crown. And ironically, really the only words we see used at Sarasa's funeral are, "Wow, she looks like she's alive." Now, this is because of a character by the name of Renko, who's introduced in chapter 397 and hasn't been seen since, was an embalmer and took it upon herself to put Sarasa's body back together. But here's the thing. Renko isn't just a standard embalmer. She's a Nen user. And we know this because Machi is fascinated with Renko. And when Machi comes over to Renko after seeing how good of a job she did with Sarasa's body, she says, "Can I learn that ability of yours, the embalming one?" To which Renko responds by saying it's not a talent, it's a special ability, referring to the fact that her embalming ability is a Nen ability. When Machi checks Renko's rejection with a question saying, "Well, does the special ability have to do with the invisible stuff around your body?" Renko realizes that the child Machi can see aura, meaning that the child Machi can already use Gyo and is a Nen user herself. And thus Renko invites Machi to come train with her, and that's presumably where Machi learns her medicinal Nen, because mind you, Machi's Nen ability manifests as Nen threads that she's been able to do superhuman things with, like reconnecting Hisoka's torn off arms. And at the end of the day, that is literally all we know about Renko. Presumably the person who taught Nen to Machi, one of the greatest medicinal Nen users on Earth, and that she had some kind of embalming Nen technique. But what if somehow that embalming technique of Renko is able to bring people back to life? And to that you might be saying,
"Oh, Nick, there's no way that Renko, a side character, has an ability that powerful. There's no way this absolute throwaway character is able to bring people back to life. Nobody can do that."
And to that I say, can they not? Postmortem Nen is not only one of the most talked about things in the Hunter x Hunter fan base, but also is becoming more and more prevalent by the chapter. The Shiyu Mafia family have a member of their mafia who is dead. She was a member of the mafia, got shot in the head, and now exists as a ghost woman who hops into the bodies of people that the Shiyu family kills so that they can walk those corpses away from the places that they were murdered. She exists after death as a ghost, which mind you is also exactly what Momozi is doing. Or Momoz, I don't really know how to say her name. The 12th prince who died and now exists as a ghost. Hisoka was able to use bungee gum after his death to restart his lungs and heart. Pito was able to use Terpsichore to cut off Gon's arm after having their head quite literally concaved. Camilla, the second prince of the Kakin Empire, has an Nen ability contingent on being killed. Halkenberg is currently possessing the body of somebody else after his body died, and so much more. Postmortem Nen makes everything so much more powerful and basically all possibilities possible. There are so many ways to remain alive after death. But Nick, are you honestly building a theory saying Morena is Sarasa simply based off the fact that both of them wore crowns made out of foliage at some point? And while I will admit that is absolutely how this theory started, chapter 405 has all but given me all the evidence I need to prove it to be 100% correct. See, because outside of the fact that Sarasa's murderer was re-brought up in chapter 405 at the same time that Morena's identity was put into question, Nobunaga establishes the fact that the Haley family seems to be following the playbook of the Phantom Troop. More specifically, Nobunaga says, and I quote, "Their leader decides the strategy and specific tactics are left up to each of them. That's our style. They're using the same playbook." Now, isn't it slightly suspicious that for some reason, all of a sudden ties are trying to be made between the Haley family and the Phantom Troop? Now you might be saying, but Nick, if Sarasa died before the actual Phantom Troop was ever formed, how would Morena know what the playbook of the Phantom Troop was? Well, one, the Phantom Troop always existed under Crollo, and that was how the Phantom Troop operated even when they were just an acting troop. And two, there's absolutely nothing stopping Sarasa and or Morena from keeping up with the movements of the Phantom Troop and deducing how they operate. Wouldn't it make sense that Sarasa, who idolized Crollo, would continue to idolize Crollo and would therefore try to build their organization in the image of an organization run by the person that they idolize? That is to say that the Haley Mafia, operating like the Phantom Troop, seems to hint at the fact that either Morena is taking notes from them or, in a sense, came from them. On top of this, Nobunaga comes to the conclusion that the Haile family is simply trying to destroy the entirety of the Kakin Empire, establishing that the Haile Mafia family isn't actually worried about the balance that the Shiyu and Char-R families are worried about, and rather that the Haile family is killing as many people as possible to throw the Kakin Empire into chaos. But why? Why would the Haile family try to destroy the Kakin Empire, an empire that they're from, an empire that they derive their power from? And the answer to that is actually rather simple. See, we can assume, based off the fact that Mr. Rinsworth's death is still talked about now, 10 years after he was brutally murdered, that Mr. Rinsworth was most likely from the Kakin Empire. Because, mind you, the Black Whale was a ship created by the Kakin Empire, and therefore the news networks that are going to be playing on the Black Whale most likely tied their roots back to the Kakin Empire. And since we're just talking about the brutal murder of a philanthropist, it seems as though the only news stations that would be reporting on that brutal murder 10 years later would be the news stations of the countries either where that murder happened or of where that person was from. And thus I feel as though it's relatively safe to assume that Mr. Rinsworth was from the Kakin Empire. So what if Morena, who is Sarasa, is trying to enact revenge on the entirety of the Kakin Empire for what Mr. Rinsworth did to her? Because the system that bought into this idea that Mr. Rinsworth was a philanthropist and not a monster was built in the Kakin Empire. Because undoubtedly there was people in the Kakin Empire who knew about what Mr. Rinsworth was doing and didn't stop him. Maybe even because the Kakin Empire doesn't value the life of children. And therefore the reason that the Haile Mafia is able to kill whoever they want in the Black Whale is because all of the people in the Black Whale are either citizens of the Kakin Empire or sympathizers to the Kakin Empire. Which, in a sense, to an insane person would make every single person, not only in the Black Whale, but in the Kakin Empire, guilty of what happened to Sarasa. Because it's the Kakin Empire that still holds up Mr. Rinsworth as the ideological standard of what a human should be, even though he's the person who cut her into pieces and slung her over a tree branch. And if Sarasa is Morena, that explains the end of the chapter. See, because at the end of the chapter, it's established that there's a level 62 enhancer by the name of Dogman, who's able to sniff out Nen types from 5 meters away, if somebody's trained in Nen from 2 meters away, and if he sniffs their head directly, he's able to figure out everything about them Nen-wise with 100% accuracy. But why would this ability be important? Well, all we know is that Dogman is looking for them, which is an important hint in itself. Dogman is looking for multiple people. But who are the multiple people that Dogman is looking for? Well, if you're going through with the ideology that Sarasa is Morena, it's most likely the Phantom Troop.
But Nick, the Haile family's currently embroiled in a battle against the Phantom Troop.
Yeah, kind of. But that's because neither side knows 100% of the information about each other. On top of this, chapter ends with Morena saying that certain members of the Haile family are training to enact their revenge on Henry. Not on Henry, Nobunaga, Finks, and Feitan, not even on Henry and Nobunaga, who were involved in the crashing of Haile's headquarters. No, Morena simply says that they're training to defeat Henry. But why would their angst and anger be singularly focused at Henry and not Henry and Nobunaga? Well, a possible explanation is the fact that Morena won't allow for violence against the Phantom Troop, which could also explain why Nobunaga and Henry were escorted out of the Haile headquarters without actually hurting them. On top of this isn't the only suspicious thing that Morena says this chapter, because when one of the members of the Haile family says to Morena it's kind of iffy whether they'll join us once they hear our goals, Morena says, yeah, that's true, but I'll try my hardest to make sure that we get a yes. Now, why would Morena, who hasn't been involved in any of the movements of the Haile family up until this point, now decide to get involved? Why is Morena going to be the person who's actively trying to swing these people over to the side of the Haile family? Well, it could be because Morena has an ace up her sleeve, and that ace is, hey, we're childhood best friends. And therefore, if Morena has this ace up her sleeve that would undoubtedly be able to affect Krollo, the leader of the Phantom Troop, it would make a whole lot of sense that she had a fair amount of confidence that she would be able to swing the Phantom Troop over to the side of the Haile family. And then again, why wouldn't the Phantom Troop join the Haile family if they found out that Sarasa was the leader of it? The only reason that the Phantom Troop is on the Black Whale in the first place is so that Krollo can find the Nen technique that'll finally be able to kill Hisoka. They're there for the treasure of the Black Whale. Treasure that they would absolutely be able to plunder if the Black Whale and the Kakin Empire were destroyed. Destruction is well within the bounds of capability for the Phantom Troop, especially if they were able to team up with a team of Nen-powered serial killers, which is just another way you could describe the Phantom Troop, Nen-powered serial killers. And when you take all of these points into account, I find it very hard to believe that Sarasa is not still alive and acting as the leader of the Haile family as Morena. But then again, what do I know? Based off all the points that I have laid out, do you guys believe that that is a possibility? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Woo! It feels good to be back on the Hunter x Hunter train.